All right, welcome back everybody to the deep dive. So today we're really going to dig into something, something we probably all struggle with, right? How all the dings and the buzzes and, just the general chaos of the digital age and honestly just like stuff, just all the stuff in our lives, how all of that really affects our ability to just be present, especially with people, with our loved ones. And, based on all the research you've been sharing, it really seems like even though we're more connected than ever online, it can actually make us feel more disconnected from real life, from the people right there with us.
Yeah.
So today, really what we want to do is really dig into that and understand what that cost is. What are we giving up when our attention is constantly divided? What does that mean for you specifically listening to this?
Absolutely. And I think it's so interesting how these different things that we're talking about, like the physical clutter in our homes, the overwhelming nature of our digital lives, and even just like our tendency to procrastinate, how all of that really feeds into this overall feeling of being overwhelmed and ultimately not being able to focus on what truly matters in the moment.
Right.
So let's start by breaking down the very tangible impact this has on us. And, I think a natural place to start is with the physical clutter, the stuff we surround ourselves with in our homes and workspaces.
Yeah. Let's talk about that because I know I get overwhelmed by that sometimes.
Sure.
It's a lot, and the research really backs it up. Like there was this UCLA study that found that something like 74%, almost 3/4 of people said they feel overwhelmed by clutter.
Wow, that's a big number.
Yeah, it's huge, and it's not just like a feeling, right? It actually affects how we perform.
Yeah.
There's research in the Journal of Organizational Behavior that found a 25% increase in productivity when people are working in clean and organized spaces.
Oh, yeah.
But UCLA, they also found that a cluttered workspace actually led to like a 40% drop in performance, and they link this to what they call cognitive overload. Like our brains are just getting bombarded with too much visual information.
Yeah, exactly. It's like your brain has a limited amount of processing power, and when it's trying to process all this extra visual information, all this clutter, it's taking away from the resources that it needs to actually focus on the task at hand.
Mm-hmm.
And we see this concept reflected in other areas of research as well.
Right.
Like, for example, there was a study by Staples, the office supply company, that found that 94% of people felt more productive when they were organized. And the National Association of Professional Organizers, they found that 80% of people reported feeling less stressed and more focused in an organized space. And this isn't just about our individual workspaces either. This actually has a real impact on teams as well.
Oh, I bet.
You think about it, there was a survey that found that 41% of people believed that having a tidy and organized workspace actually enhanced the productivity of the entire team.
Wow.
And on the flip side, 21% of people said that they actually had an increased workload because their colleagues were so messy and disorganized.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, and even beyond productivity, there's also the perception of professionalism. 30% of people in this survey said that they view tidiness as a sign of professionalism.
Okay.
And get this, 1 in 10 bosses said that they actually consider the tidiness of an employee's workspace when making decisions about promotions.
Oh, wow. I never thought about that.
It's true. So there's a real impact there.
Yeah.
And then you layer on the financial cost of all of this.
Right.
There was a study that estimated that Americans spend about $2.7 billion annually replacing lost items.
Oh my gosh.
And on average, people spend about 2.5 days per year just searching for misplaced things. And that's just for physical items. When you factor in digital documents, that number jumps up to 4.5 hours per week spent searching for files on our computers.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So there's a real cost associated with this, both in terms of time and money.
Yeah.
And then, beyond these kind of like practical implications, there's also the neurological research. There was a really fascinating fMRI study done in 2011 that showed that decluttering, like physically getting rid of clutter, actually improves focus, information processing, and productivity.
Okay.
And conversely, they found that clutter increases cognitive overload and actually reduces working memory capacity.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And this isn't just limited to adults either. This has a real impact on students as well. There was a study that found that 85% of students find disorganized environments to be really stressful and overwhelming.
Oh, yeah.
And 89% of them reported being able to focus better when their study space was clean and organized.
Mm.
So it's really clear that clutter has a very real and measurable impact on our ability to focus and be productive.
Yeah, it really does. And it's not just the physical clutter, right? Like
Yeah.
like what about all the unfinished tasks that we all have swirling around in our heads? You know, that's where that Zeigarnik effect comes in, right? We tend to remember those things that we haven't finished way more vividly than the things we've actually completed.
Exactly. It's like our brains are wired to keep track of unfinished business.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost like there's this little mental tab open for each task that we haven't completed.
Okay.
You know, whether it's a chore we've been putting off or an email we need to respond to or a bill we need to pay. All of these things just kind of accumulate in the back of our minds.
Yeah.
And that creates this background level of stress.
Yeah.
You know, there's research that shows that this accumulation of unfinished tasks is directly linked to procrastination. You know, we put things off because we're overwhelmed by the sheer volume of things we need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it also makes it harder to relax and enjoy our downtime,
Oh, yeah.
you know, because we're constantly being reminded of these unfinished tasks.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so it's a real drain on our cognitive resources, and it prevents us from being fully present in the moment.
Right, right. So we've talked about physical clutter, we've talked about the mental clutter of unfinished tasks, but what about our digital lives?
Yeah.
You know, our inboxes are overflowing, our desktops are a mess, we have a million tabs open at any given time.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's like the principles of organization and efficiency. You know, they're not just limited to our physical spaces, they also apply to our digital lives.
Mm-hmm.
There was a study conducted at Princeton University and published in the Journal of Environmental Psychology that found that people were about 20% more productive when they worked in an organized digital environment.
Okay.
And it's not just about individuals either. There was a corporate example where after implementing a company-wide decluttering initiative, you know, where they encouraged employees to clean up their inboxes and organize their files, they actually saw a 15% increase in overall output.
Mm.
And the Harvard Business Review, you know, they published an article that suggested that prioritizing tasks can actually increase productivity by as much as 25%.
Wow, that's significant.
Yeah, and there's a lot of really practical things we can do to apply this to our digital lives.
Oh.
You know, things like using consistent naming conventions for our files, creating logical folder structures, utilizing cloud storage effectively. These are all simple steps that can make a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the most important things is to regularly delete things that we no longer need and make sure we're backing up our important data.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Because that not only frees up space on our devices,
Mm-hmm.
but it also reduces that mental clutter that we were talking about earlier.
Right.
And that has a really positive impact on our mental well-being. You know, when we feel more in control of our digital lives, we experience less stress and overwhelm, we feel calmer, and we're able to think more clearly.
Yeah.
And there's actually research that links cluttered homes to a more negative perception of one's home and a lower level of life satisfaction.
Mm.
So it's not a stretch to think that a chaotic digital life could have a similar negative impact on our overall well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about procrastination because, I mean, I think we've all been there. We all have things that we put off until the last minute.
Oh, for sure.
And the statistics you shared are really eye-opening. Like something like 20% of adults are considered chronic procrastinators. Yeah. And it's even higher for students. Like 50% of college students are considered chronic procrastinators, and then 80 to 95% of all students procrastinate at least occasionally.
It's incredibly common, and I think it's important to acknowledge that procrastination is more than just, you know, a quirky personality trait or a bad habit.
Right.
It can actually have some really significant negative effects on our mental health.
Mm-hmm.
There was a study that found that 94% of people believe that procrastination hurts their happiness, and 18% of those people said it hurts their happiness extremely.
Wow.
And more than 80% of people report experiencing negative feelings after they procrastinate, you know, feelings of guilt, stress, anxiety.
Oh, yeah.
And research has linked procrastination to a whole host of negative outcomes, including depression, anxiety, stress, chronic pain, poor sleep, physical inactivity, poor health behaviors in general, even loneliness and financial problems.
Mm.
And this ties back to the idea of presence that we were discussing earlier. You know, when we're constantly preoccupied with the tasks that we're putting off, when we're letting those things hang over our heads, it really robs us of the ability to be fully present in the moment.
Yeah.
And